Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we're getting into a topic that's just buzzing everywhere, semaglutide. But we're not just going to talk about the basic biology. Your sources, and especially the thinking from Dan Hollis, they show this really deep human story. So our mission here is to pull out those key, sometimes overlooked pieces of wisdom about what actually happens when someone goes through significant weight loss like this. And yeah, Dan Hollis is really central to how we're looking at this material today. He's kind of our guide. What's really different about him is he doesn't sound like a marketer. He sounds like someone who's actually lived in that space between biology and identity. We'll be digging into parts of his manifesto and some of his other teachings to really get a handle on this journey.
That's exactly right. And this deep dive, it's definitely going to move us past thinking of semaglutide as like some magic fix. Instead, we're looking at it the way Dan Hollis frames it, as a powerful tool. And the key thing he says is this tool, it doesn't fix you, it gives you space to fix yourself. Which means, it's not just about feeling less hungry. We have to understand the deeper things happening in the brain, how we perceive hunger, satisfaction, reward. And that, as Dan points out, can be, well, both liberating and honestly kind of terrifying.
Liberating and terrifying. Wow, yeah, that really sets the scene, doesn't it? And we are going to unpack some really surprising angles here, maybe starting with the biggest one Dan throws out there, this idea that willpower was never the problem. I mean, for so many people listening, that's just a huge shift in thinking about, past struggles.
Oh, absolutely. It really is. Dan Hollis basically challenges that whole core idea that struggling with weight is about a lack of self-control or some kind of moral issue. He argues pretty compellingly that our brain's hunger signals, these primal drives, they're just so incredibly strong. So it's less about not having willpower and more like you're in this really unfair fight against your own biology. Just understanding that lifts this massive weight, right? It shifts it from I failed to my biology was working against me. It's incredibly freeing. It changes the whole story.
Yeah, that clicks because it means we've maybe been trying to solve the wrong issue all along, and that flows right into another one of Dan's big points. The real work begins after the medication. It's like when the biological noise quiets down, the emotional stuff, that landscape, just comes right into view. It's emotional weight just as much as physical weight. Precisely. And what's really fascinating, and something Hollis talks about a lot, is when that physical hunger really quiets down, when the body stops screaming for food, this profound silence can actually emerge. And in that quiet space, things that were buried, old stories, maybe difficult truths, they tend to bubble up. See, for a lot of folks, food wasn't just fuel. It was comfort, distraction, maybe even just something to plan your day around. So when that sort of crutch gets kicked away, suddenly people are face to face with parts of themselves they might have been avoiding for years. So this deep dive is really about figuring out how you rebuild your relationship with food, with your body, with yourself, when food isn't the go-to answer anymore, when it's not the default plan.
Okay, so if willpower wasn't the main issue and the real heavy lifting starts after the drug kicks in, what does that work actually look like? Dan talks a lot about something he calls narrative reassembly. Can you kind of break that down for us? Yeah, absolutely. So Dan's idea is that our long-term success, our relationship with food and our bodies, it's all deeply connected to the stories we tell ourselves about it. Narrative reassembly is basically, well, rewriting that story. Think about it. For years, maybe decades, the story might have been one of struggle, failure, this uncontrollable hunger, or maybe feeling like your body is just fundamentally flawed or broken. When semaglutide helps quiet that biological static, it creates this opening, this chance to build a new story, one that's about agency, about capability, about making conscious choices. It's moving from, like, I have no control to, okay, my biology was shouting, but now I have a tool to turn down the volume and I can make different choices.
That's such a powerful shifting perspective. It really takes the shame out of the equation, doesn't it? Puts the focus back on just understanding what's going on. And connected to that, Dan has this really striking line. People don't relapse into hunger. They relapse into confusion. What's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, that's a really critical piece of his framework. Even when the biological hunger cues are turned way down, the old habits, the emotional triggers, just the sheer routine of eating for reasons other than actual physical hunger, those often stick around. So if someone hasn't done that work, that narrative reassembly we just talked about, if they haven't really dug into why they used to reach for certain foods, was it comfort, stress, boredom, celebration? Then when the medication takes away the physical drive, they're left kind of floating. There's a void. They aren't physically ravenous, but they feel an urge, an impulse, and they don't know what to do with it. That's the confusion. And without a new roadmap, a new set of responses, it's easy to just fall back to the old familiar behaviors, not from hunger, but from confusion about how to navigate this new, quieter internal landscape.
Ah, okay. So it's really about consciously replacing those old, maybe automatic habits with new intentional ones. And I guess that's where Dan's concept of neurobiological scaffolding fits in. What does he mean by that?
That's exactly. Yeah. Neurobiological scaffolding. It sounds technical, but it's really about consciously, deliberately building new pathways in your brain. You do this through consistent, intentional actions, rituals, rhythms, routines. So if food used to be your automatic response to feeling stressed, you need to actively build and practice a new response. Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's calling a friend. Maybe it's deep breathing. It means establishing things like regular meal times, practicing mindful eating, finding non-food ways to cope with emotions, maybe developing a more positive relationship with physical activity. These become the new scaffolds, the support structures that help reinforce the new, healthier neural pathways instead of the old, ingrained ones. It's about creating structure and predictability when those loud hunger cues aren't driving everything.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like you're not just redecorating the old house, you're actually building a new foundation and structure. Okay, and one last big piece. Dan really hammers home the role of community in all of this. Why does he see that as so absolutely vital?
Oh, he is incredibly clear on this. Cannot stress it enough. He says very directly, most people don't fail because the medication doesn't work. They fail because they were alone. Think about it, this kind of transformation, especially when it involves fundamentally rethinking your relationship with food, with your body, maybe even your identity. It can be profoundly isolating. It's a huge shift. So having a community, people who get it, who understand the unique mix of challenges, that liberation and that terror of the silence we talked about, the need to rewrite your story, the effort of building that new scaffolding, and it's just indispensable. It provides, accountability, shared experience, empathy, practical tips, and just that basic human connection that fights off the confusion and loneliness that can so easily lead someone back to old patterns.
Wow. Okay. We've really covered a lot of ground here, moving way past just the mechanics of semaglutide into this really profound human experience that Dan Hollis illuminates. So, wrapping things up, what does this all really mean for you, the listener? We've kind of surfaced this central paradox, right? That while, as Hollis says, weight loss is biology, actually staying there is narrative. Semaglutide offers this incredibly valuable pause button, but what fills that pause, the intention, the structure, the support, that seems to be what dictates the long-term outcome.
Absolutely. If you weave together all these threads from Dan Hollis's thinking, the journey, it's clearly not just about hitting a number on the scale.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally about narrative reassembly, changing that core story you tell yourself. It's about rebuilding a sense of agency, and it's about understanding that crucial insight. People don't relapse into hunger. They relapse into confusion, which points directly to why that neurobiological scaffolding, the new rituals, the routines, is so essential. You're literally rewiring things. And underpinning all of it is the absolute necessity of community. Because, again, most people don't fail because the medication doesn't work. They fail because they were alone.
That really lands as such a powerful and actually quite empowering takeaway. It brings us right to that final message from Dan Hollis that feels so important. You're not starting over, you're starting right. Which means, working with your biology, not beating yourself up over past struggles. It means using tools that actually align with how your body and brain function, and crucially, doing it alongside people who truly understand the path you're on. It's about building something sustainable.
Right. So maybe the final thought to leave you with, something to really chew on, is this. What happens when your body stops screaming for food, but your soul still wants something to chew on?
That is definitely a profound thought to sit with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today, exploring these really transformative insights. We hope you continue to think about what all this means for you.